Welcome Facebook Live, Elise Southwell at NASDAQ Market Site in Times Square for NASDAQ Disruptors. Today we're talking about digital advertising. We're giving you the inside scoop on a hot topic that's affecting the space, viewability. Everyone's talking about viewability. We have Snapchat, Facebook, Google, Vice, New York Times. We have the expert in the space. We have founder and CEO of viewability vendor Moat, Jonah Goodhart. Welcome, Jonah.
Thanks, Elise. Thanks for having me.
So I think to start, it would be helpful if you can give our viewers on Facebook a 101 on digital advertising, just to sort of level the field.
Absolutely. So digital advertising has been around about 20 years at this point, and it makes up $168 billion in annual spend. $168 billion out of $600 billion in total advertising. So a pretty enormous amount of money is spent on digital advertising and digital ads. And of that, believe it or not, $100 billion of those dollars go to two companies, go to Facebook and Google. And so essentially, the free internet that we all love, the ability to share messaging, to talk to each other, to get news, to get information, is all being funded and fueled by digital advertising. And I think it's a pretty incredible ecosystem that I get the pleasure to be a part of.
So now, what's viewability?
Yeah.
Viewability 101.
Absolutely. Viewability is a really simple idea. It just means that the ad that you bought was there. If you went outside of the studio we're in Times Square and looked up at an ad, you would assume that if you bought an ad, somebody could physically see it. That's all it is. And so in digital, turns out that not every ad that people buy actually makes it to a consumer's screen. Turns out, in fact, about half of all advertising that's bought never actually makes it onto somebody's screen. And so we have a fundamental issue in a $168 billion market when half of all of the ads never actually show up on somebody's screen. And so that's what we've been working through and dealing with as an industry.
Cool. So Moat, what's Moat?
Yeah, Moat's actually a measurement and analytics company. So we help the largest marketers in the world and the largest publishers in the world. And we help them understand, frankly, not just viewability, but what we think of as consumer attention. How people pay attention in a world that's mostly digital. We get our news in digital. We do medical research in digital. We communicate with friends in digital. We watch TV in digital. And so as our behavior has shifted, we're trying to understand how marketers still reach people, how marketers still tell a story, and how they know that it was successful. And so we have a measurement platform that works with marketers and publishers to try to understand consumer attention, and we think that's the key.
It's funny because everybody said that, you know, everybody back in the day, it's like the web is the DR. And I mean, I don't know, to quote John, Steinberg, founder of Cheddar, he says, what kid do you know that's coming out of college that is going to go to your cable company and say, hey, I want cable and whatever. Nobody's watching TV, everybody's on the web, and I know it is the premium medium for marketing and advertisers.
Absolutely, and I'm a big believer in John, and we actually have a fund, and our fund invested in Cheddar, so we're happy investors. What I would say, though, is that he's exactly right, that consumer behavior has changed in terms of where we consume content and media. But you know what hasn't changed is that we still love brands. Brands still have value. There's trust that get created from a brand, and that trust takes time. And over time, we're able to make decisions about what brands we trust with our time and ultimately with our money. And I think that's really the key, and that hasn't changed. The mechanisms changed. How we communicate stories have changed. But branding and the ability to create intangible trust with consumers is exactly, in my opinion, the same thing it was 50 years ago, and it's even more important now.
Why is viewability so important?
Yeah, I mean, so viewability is a foundation. Viewability just simply says, I bought an ad and I want to know that it was there. Ultimately, though, our view is that this is not about viewability. Viewability is simply the beginning of the conversation, not the end. Viewability just says the ad was there. So how crazy it is that we live in a world where there's a lot of money being spent on ads that are never there. We need to solve that as soon as possible. But the question is not just, did you get an ad that was viewable that somebody could see? The real question is, did somebody pay attention? And I think in a world where we now watch what we want, where we want, when we want, how we want, on the device that we want, increasingly the question that marketers and content creators are asking is, how do I know that I got somebody's attention? How do I measure that, and how do I get more of it? Because attention ultimately is our scarce resource.
Was viewability your idea?
No, definitely not. So viewability started about 5 years ago, actually. There were a couple of companies working on it, and then a joint industry task force came together. It was what's called the IAB, the ANA, and the 4As, a bunch of acronyms. Basically, advertisers, publishers, and agencies got together and said, hold on a second. if we're going to grow up as a medium, if we're going to have sustainability, if we're going to be able to have a business in the end of the day that can offer free content and enable people to see messages from marketers, we got to figure out some of the basics here. And viewability was one of the first things they said. We need to shift from a served impression, which means marketers pay for the fact that an ad was created, not that it was necessarily seen on somebody's screen, to a viewable impression standard, where we know that somebody actually had a chance to see it. And that's the key. It doesn't mean that they saw it and paid attention. It just means that they had a chance to see it. And that opportunity to see became a really important topic for digital.
So on the web, you have above the fold, below the fold,
Yeah.
right? Above the fold meaning what's in the screen and view right at that one time. But isn't it essentially everything that's above the fold is viewable? You know, so what about all the great stuff below the fold?
Yeah, absolutely. So think about how you use your phone, right? A lot of usage at this point is mobile. Think about how you flip through your newsfeed. Think about how you flip from story to story, depending on what device you're using, what platform you're using. Ads find their way in different forms and different formats, depending on how you're using your phone and, frankly, how you're consuming content. Think about how it worked in television. Totally different. Television, you sit there, you watch TV, it takes over the entire screen. There's sight, sound, and motion. We stop your content in TV. You have no choice, and we're going to show you a message from marketers. In digital, though, it's very different. Sometimes an ad takes over your whole screen, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's text, sometimes it's an image, sometimes you can hear it, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you never even see it, and it was somewhere at the bottom of your screen. And so we have a whole host of issues that we have to solve for in digital. And part of the challenge is that my view is we've been thinking about this world as TV versus digital, newspapers and magazines versus digital. The reality is that all of those things are converging into digital. We now watch TV in digital. We read our magazines in digital. We consume newspapers in digital. And so I think we have to ask a better question, which is, in a world that's increasingly digitally enabled, how do we understand attention, and how do we ultimately reach people who are paying attention?
NASDAQ is the original disruptor. Do you think Moat is a disruptor?
I hope so. We're trying to ask hard questions. I think disrupting is about asking questions and about questioning the status quo. So the status quo in digital advertising is that marketers pay for ads that may or may not be seen, that may or may not be seen by a human being, and that may or may not ever make it to a person's screen. I think that's fundamentally flawed. And so the simple question that we're asking is, how do we change the currency of digital advertising? Absolutely to include that ads can be seen, that they're viewable, but our view is we have to go further. Our view is we have an opportunity to actually ask a better question that looks at attention and looks at things that ultimately are driving effectiveness for marketers and, frankly, for storytelling. After all, I think we all love and enjoy a free and open internet, and we like to be able to get what we want, where we want, and how we want it. Advertising funds and fuels that. So we need to figure out how to make those two worlds work.
Very cool. So you founded Moat with your brother in 2010, 6 years ago. Can you tell us how family business, how was it having a family biz? It's
great. So my brother and I have been in business together in digital businesses for 18, 19 years, and we've been doing a number of businesses. I actually have two brothers. All three of us have built a couple of businesses together over the last 20 or so years. So it's been great. I mean, one of the things that's critical when you think about a business partner is someone that you can trust. Probably the number one most important thing is trust. I would say equally important to trust is alignment of values. You want to know that in the end of the day, given the same set of information, I'm not talking about day-to-day decisions, but given the same set of information, you're going to drive towards the same goals. And I think that's critical. And when you're dealing with someone that you trust, when you're dealing with family, you have that opportunity. And we've been, I think, very fortunate as a family that we've really worked well together for a long time.
Do you have any good family stories for us?
Yeah,
anything you could share?
Sure. One of them, so my brother Noah, that I run the company with, and that we co-founded the company together, actually had a gumball business years and years ago, before we even got into the digital world. And he sold gumballs, essentially. He bought gumball machines, and it was one of his first businesses. And he hired me as a salesperson. So I actually worked for him for a very short period of time, essentially getting gumball machines placed throughout the town that we lived in. And from my perspective, it was a lot of fun because we didn't know what the business was. We didn't know what the rules for a business are. We didn't know how to run a business, and we were just figuring that out together. Fast forward, we've been doing this now for 20 years, and I think you start to learn things. You start to see patterns. You start to come up with ways that we look at the world, and I think that's helped us make different decisions and hopefully help with where we're at today.
Gumballs, that's good. So, okay, you talk about learning things. What have you learned since you founded Moat?
Yeah, well, one of the things I've learned is that change takes time. It's not something that's instant. but change can happen. And I think that is fundamentally one of the most important things that I realized with Moat is that if you stay at it, if you stay focused on it, things do change. Sometimes it takes time, but then when it changes, all of a sudden we're in a new world. People talk to me all the time about, well, there's friction and this can't happen and that can't happen, and that's human nature. If 15 years ago or 10 years ago you said, hey, we're going to live in a world where I'm going to be able to push a button, something's going to instantly show up at my door, in 10 minutes show up at my door, I can hop in a car, it's all going to be handled, I think we would have said, well, that's going to be too difficult and look at all these problems with it. If you remember in New York City when taxis began taking credit cards, for those of you who go into taxis like I have, what do they say? They said, no, 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 we're not going to take credit cards, absolutely not, cash only. And then it took a month or two, and they said, oh, okay, actually this is better with credit cards. We like it, we embrace it, and the world changed. So I think sometimes as humans, we think things are going to be hard. We think that it's going to take a tremendous amount of friction. You have to keep fighting through it because eventually things do change.
I love that taxi cab. That's so good. That's so true. So what's the culture like at Moat?
Yeah, culture is a couple things. Number one, most importantly, positive. So when you're building a company, it's going to be hard. You're going to have days that are not good. You're going to have days that are great. And it's a roller coaster like every startup is. And so staying positive is the most important thing. Second thing is being detail oriented. We think the details matter. We think the little details matter. And it's something that we endeavor to be part of our day-to-day at Moat. And so positive, detail oriented. And I think taking responsibility for what we're doing and what we're trying to build. Moat is in a very interesting spot, in my humble opinion, because we're not on the buy side or the sell side. Right? We power analytics and measurement on behalf of some of the largest marketers and some of the largest content creators and some of the largest publishers and broadcasters and others. And so we're sitting right in the middle trying to create a better way, trying to create an ecosystem that works better. And it's an honor, but it's also a huge responsibility that we take very seriously.
Huge, huge. What are your predictions for the future of digital advertising that you could share with our viewers?
Well, what I would say is that the world is becoming digital. So when we think about digital measurement, we just think about measurement. When we think about digital media, we just think about media. So it used to be the case that on Thursday night at 8 o'clock, we would sit down and watch TV. That was how we consumed television. Most people don't do that anymore. Most people watch TV content. They just watch what they want, where they want, when they want, how they want. That's a fundamentally major shift. And so what I would say is that's all now digitally enabled and digitally powered. So the question is, in a world that's going to be increasingly digital, I think everything that can be digital will be digital, how do we react in that world as marketers, as storytellers? Who are the folks that create the content? Who's paying for the content? Who's licensing the content? And as a consumer, how do I interact with that? Am I paying subscription fees? Am I seeing advertisements? And as a marketer, how do I react to that? And so in a world where it's not just a TV, where it's not just a newspaper, where people are in all different mindsets on all different platforms and all different sites, I still got to reach them, I still got to communicate my message, and I need to figure out how to do it. So the world's certainly more complex, but I think really exciting at the same time.
You have a favorite person who's one of my favorite people, and you share a quote. I'm going to read it. You have a favorite quote that he said, Warren Buffett. I'm going to read it to you. In business, I look for economic castles protected by unbreachable moats. Warren Buffett. Can you tell me why that's your favorite quote?
Yeah, so first of all, what I love about Warren Buffett is that he's one of the most tremendous investors we've ever seen, of course. And one of the things that he talks about is when he makes a decision about the companies that he chooses, he thinks about what he calls their moat. And he says it's not the formula behind their soda. He says it's not actually the packaging or the distribution. He says it's the intangible trust that a consumer has with that brand. If you think about that for a second, intangible trust is what he says protects that company. That's their competitive advantage. And that's what he says builds their moat. And so we thought, first of all, pretty cool name to have for our company. But second of all, in the end of the day, we are trying to help brands strengthen the trust that they have, strengthen the message that they have, strengthen the ability to communicate with consumers. And we think that's really critical in a world of course, that's increasingly complex and digital.
Snowball Effect is his book, right? That's a great book, big, thick book. Okay, so, right. Let's talk about you for a second as an investor. You, with your brother, you fund tons of companies, huge companies.
Yeah.
For everybody out there that doesn't know, I mean, you name them. You tell us all of them. I know
Yeah,
you're
so,
big
well, so
guy.
the background is about 10 years ago, before we started Moat, my brother, Noah Goodhart, myself, and Mike Walrath, our third partner, created something called, for lack of creativity, Walrath Goodhart Investments, or WGI. And we just started investing in startups. And basically our idea was bet on founders that we believe in, realizing that business is going to change. They're going to figure it out, and that every great business doesn't start out where it ends. If it's successful, it's never what it was in the beginning. And so we found some phenomenal entrepreneurs like Howard Lerman, who's the CEO of Yext, Josh McFarlane, who's the CEO of Telepart, and others who have created businesses, I think, out of their sheer desire to do something impactful and their sheer desire to work hard and work as hard or harder than anybody else. And so it's been fun betting on entrepreneurs, and that's really what that's all about.
So do you meet with them on a regular basis, and they're, asking you questions about, strategic moves? Is that
Sometimes, honestly, if anything, it's as much for me asking them questions as well. How do you deal with this? How do you think about this? All different entrepreneurs that I've gotten the pleasure of interacting with are facing different situations, whether they're rolling out new products, whether they're raising money, whether they're hiring people, whether they're growing internationally. And so I try to be available for people when they ask me. And likewise, I ask them just as many questions as well about how they make different decisions and how they think through different processes. So it's a pretty phenomenal opportunity that I feel blessed to be able to have.
It's so cool. It's really so cool. So NASDAQ culture is all about ambition,
Yeah.
technology, obviously entrepreneurship. Do you have some words of wisdom for entrepreneurs out there, people that have really good idea?
Yeah, what I would say is be obsessive in a positive way. One of the things that my oldest brother said to me, he said, when you really zoom into a business or an area or a topic, the world slows down a little bit. And I think that's so true. I think this idea that things happen overnight is actually not the case. I think if you pay enough attention to something, you'll begin to see the trends. You'll begin to see how that's changing. And in a sense, it slows down so you can make decisions as a result of that. So what I would say to entrepreneurs is go deep. Get obsessive in a good way about a topic. Really understand every single thing that there is to understand about that topic, and you'll begin to, quote unquote, see the future a little bit. You'll begin to be able to make decisions based on what you see happening. And most people aren't that deep. Most people don't spend that much time looking at every little nuanced piece of an area. And so when you do, you become an expert, and you're able to make decisions and see things that other people can't see.
Jonah Goodhart from Moat, thank you so much for being here. I'm Elise Southwell with NASDAQ Disruptors. Again, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.